Hey, and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to show you a surprisingly easy way to do a cool and detailed swamp base for both miniatures and more. First, I start off by taking the models off of their bases. It's easier to work with when they're not on there. Once they're off, I try to figure out the rough shape that I'd like to be the raised muddy areas. And for that, I use some wall filler. I found this wall filler at a local hardware store. This 3 liters is definitely overkill for just miniatures, but it does last a long time, so it can be used for loads of other things, like, walls. I just use my finger to spread it around the base until it's the rough height and shape that I want. And because this wall filler is water based, you can also get a smooth look by putting a dab of water onto your finger and smoothing it out. The basing bits I'm going to be using for this are some 3D printed stumps, roots, mushrooms and skulls. I'm curious if GW sells a few of these. Let's check it out. So that's a no. Anyway, when I've got it to the shape I like, I press the minis into it to mark where I want them to be, and then I can figure out where I can put some of the basing bits. Once I've found the right spot, I try to wipe away some of the filler so I can put down some super glue at the base to stick the bits in. Sometimes I want the bits to look a little more sunken into the base, so for that I use some sandpaper or a file to sand it down a little bit to fit. Always wear a respirator when sanding down resin, you do not want to get that stuff into your lungs. Once you've got everything roughly in place, it should look something like this. But now it's time to brew a cuppa and relax while it dries. After letting everything dry completely, it's priming time. I use Army Painter's matte black for this, and it's always seemed to work quite well for me. When done, I start adding a bit of the mud texture, and to do that I use some Sterling Battle Mire. Make sure to use an old brush for applying the texture paints because they will definitely damage your brushes. This is also where I apply some texture to the underside of the models too, and especially for the treads. While that all sets, I paint the wood stumps and roots with some Rhinox hide. And use some Steel Legion drab for the skulls. For the mushrooms, you can do so many different variations, but I opted to use Iron Rack skin this time. Next up is where the puddles are going to be. For the bottom layer of that, I use some Death World Forest and blend it into the edges where it meets the mud. Now to give it even more of a dirty look, I use some Agrax Earthshade everywhere. Once the Agrax has dried, I lightly dry brush the wooden pieces with some Mournfang Brown. Then, to highlight the mud, I stipple and dry brush some Catachan flesh over it. Should look something like this after all of that. Now, before I glue the models down, I test where the models are going to go again to check if they're going to be submerged. If they are, I glue them in place now. Thankfully this one isn't going to be, so it's going to be a lot easier to show what to do. But I'll glue the other one down now. Now it's onto the puddles. For them, I whip out some Green Stuff World's UV resin, some of their glow-in-the-dark yellow resin, and some Athonian camo shade. And I mix them all up together in a cut-up paper cup. I don't use much, just a drop of both camo shade and the glow yellow, and mix that into a decent amount of the normal resin. For mixing and applying, I use some cocktail sticks. When it's fully mixed, I start applying it gently to the edge of the miniature's base to help create a small barrier so the rest of the resin doesn't drip off. To harden this UV resin, I use Green Stuff World's UV torch. I've found it works well and it's quite cheap. You can of course pour the resin in after doing this if you have a big enough puddle to fill, but the puddles I were making were quite small and shallow. If you do want to make deeper puddles, I recommend using tape around the edge to help create the barrier. But now that I've got a small barrier, I'm going to finish the rest of it. When you've got all of it there and it's fully hardened, the result should be this swampy, sickly green colour. I'm going to quickly finish the other one so we can move on. With all the puddles ready, the next step is to create some water droplets. To make them, I use the secret method, which is of course, clear fishing line. I recommend using some tweezers here because you don't want to get the resin on your hands, and we'll be working with really small pieces, so it can be hard to work with. But the basic idea, cut a small piece of line and figure out whereabouts you want it to be. When you know where to put it, carefully apply a drop of the mixed resin using one of the sticks, and try to place it there straight up with the tweezers. Once it's in the right spot, just harden it in place with some of the UV light and it should stay there. And there we go. Now it's just a case of doing that until you're happy. You can also add them to the miniature itself and make it look like the drips are coming from there. Now it's time to make them look like proper droplets, and to add some water ripples too. I use Green Stuff World Splash Gel for that, and apply it with the sticks. To do the droplet effect, I add a small blob to the tips of the fishing line, and for the ripple effect, I try to do small circles around the base of the droplets to make it look like small waves are coming from it. I then add some extra little ripples around the debris that's in the water or around the mud to make it look like the ripples are bouncing off of it. And while it doesn't look like it at the moment, it will dry clear after it's fully set. So, while that finish is drying, I use some Abaddon black around the rim of the base to finish it off. And now, the miniatures are finally complete. The splash gel really adds a lot to the puddles and it helps bring the swamp to life. I hope this helped inspire you to do some of your own swamp basing projects, and if it has, let me know how it goes in the comments. I'm also planning on modelling some of my own basing bits for different projects too, so if you want to check that out, links in the description. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos to come, and I'll see you in the next one.